Yum, yum!
Hey guys, this is Yazan Malkosh from Pixel Fondue. Today we're going to take a look at lighting this interior scene desktop setup, something I worked on a little while back. I'll be using my SLIK plugin. If you're not aware of the SLIK plugin for Modo, SLIK2 Pseudo Lighting and Illuminance Kit. It gives you a number of different lighting presets that you're able to drag and drop onto your scene and get the highlights where you want them to be. Also allows you to have a light board to mute, solo, and delete lights and change color intensity directly from one location. I use this a lot in my lighting because I don't like to dig into multiple forms and tabs and things of that nature. It also allows you to save studios. So if you're done with your lighting and you like to use that same setup, you can either save the studio or even bake it to an HDR. It comes pre-assembled with already baked HDRs, and then you can also swap the HDR for the actual studio if you want to fiddle around and save your own modifications of that. There's additional tools in here like materials and material overrides and things of that nature, even saving your own version of the lighting presets, as well as kind of the best SLIK2 or progressive lighting or preferences that are specific to SLIK. Anyway, that's enough about that. The actual principles should be pretty much standard, so you can actually use normal lights if you don't have SLIK, or if you're using a different 3D application that's not Modo. I'm just going to walk you through how I approach lighting, not necessarily there's multiple ways of doing lighting, and when you're talking to virtual photographers or just general photographers, each person has their own approach in terms of how to light a scene and how to light a specific shot that they're looking for. I also have some specific things I want to achieve from this. In this case, for example, I've got these fabric swatches, and fabric is really a great textile material, but to really get the most out of it, I feel that lighting needs to be done in a specific way to get the most out of your fabric feel. And this is kind of the scene setup, nothing too fancy. It's an empty room. I don't have anything around it other than the floor, and actually the floor is probably not going to be visible in that shot specifically, but I was doing multiple shots in there. I had some chairs in there as well. But for now, it's just these items right here. We've got the iPad, pencil, some Copic markers, a sketchbook, some swatches, a figurine of some sort that I picked up from the asset site. Most of these have come to me, and I didn't really model any of it. This actually came from Omar. From Ivy Studios. I got the mug from, I think, the asset site as well. Got this from CG Trader with the plant. So I give props to that. Assets site for this again. Asset site after Omar kind of cleaned this up, I believe. Same thing with the pencil. Asset site. The block of wood. A block of wood, I guess it's a normal thing to have. The iPad, I believe I got that from GrabCAD. Got some really great models there. You guys should take a look. I'll put links to all of these things so you guys can go in there and pick it up. I'm finding myself using these sites more and more to get filler items. So for me, the swatches are my main target. The rest of it is just filler. So I'll go in and find it anywhere I can. There's great modelers out there, people who do scanning, for instance, with the planter. For the plant here, and I just use them as is. I might spend some additional time kind of tweaking some details. For example, in the coffee here, I was able to get a texture of the foam, but I also sculpted some of the bubbles on there just to kind of give it a sense of volume, because again, some of my shots were reflecting, and I want to make sure that I'm getting as much as I can in terms of details. But it's a pretty sensible setup. It's nothing too complex. Let's show you kind of what that looks like in a render. So that's what it looks like. That's what we're going to be shooting for in terms of the quality of the render. You'll see kind of the progressive rendering is what I use mostly these days. I don't use the traditional rendering as much because this allows me to just leave my computer on and it just goes and really makes things look really, really clean and sweet without too much fiddling around. And that's about it. So let's get started and let's light up this scene. So in this start, we're going to have basically an empty scene. I'm going to get rid of the lights to kind of show you what this looks like. My environment is empty. There's no materials there, so it's going to get darker here as we go along. So with SLIK, it allows you, like I said, clean up all the scene lights directly. I don't believe I have any other lights in here. Yeah, I've got no lights. So I'm going to just hit the delete button for all the lights. Press OK. So what that does is it looks at all the scene lights, and obviously these are much more than just lights. They're lighting rigs. They have a lot of information there. There's the locators and the hit locators and things like that. So it's making a full cleanup to get rid of every single thing that's attached to them. That's something else I also like about it. Sometimes you delete some things like shaders, and obviously this does have shaders because we're using some of the illumination panels. This makes sure that every single thing is going to be cleaned up, and you won't find any residue of the SLIK lights in there. There we go. So now that we have an empty scene, obviously my screen is on, so that's going to be a luminous screen. But if I turn, I'm going to open up my progressive render. I'm using a different kit here just to kind of open up a preview window. You can also open it up by pressing render and open preview. You can use that. I prefer this. Again, part of what I do a lot of times, and a lot of us on the Pixel Fondue crew, you know, you come up with these tools that are helpful to you in your workflow, and then you package it up and try to sell it to see if other people will find it useful. SLIK being kind of how I've done it with the lighting. This is the Render Assistant Raw, hopefully coming up soon, but it'll give you the ability to have some really quick ways to render without having to fiddle around with the settings or even opening up the render tab or anything at all. In fact, let's collapse this thing. So here's what I have right now, right? One illumination source, which is the actual screen. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to add an HDR, and for me this HDR, part of what RAW allows you to do is just add any kind of EXR file. Once you restart Modo, it adds it to the list. What's cool about this, you can search for something. So if I wanted to do interior, what I'm finding right now is I'm cleaning up all my HDR images, which I have scattered all over my desktop and documents. I'm just dumping it into this one directory, and now I can just quickly just click on that. It gets added. I'll show you where it goes. It gets added to a secondary environment item, so that if you remove it, it removes itself from the scene. But basically what it does is it adds itself as an environment map. You can see some of the lighting already affecting GL and obviously affecting it in the render window. Now, what I've chosen here is a simple interior, something that would have this scene in context. It's going to be either in a meeting room or in an interior of a room. The reason I like to do this is that this kind of HDR or EXR file gives me the ability to get some natural colored and value lighting in there. If you were doing this in real photography, you'd do this on a desktop. You might add additional supplemental lights, which is what we're going to do with SLIK, but the initial setup gives you some feeling of what the light is like in that room. Now, obviously, I can pump this up, and it might be enough for me. I typically like to art direct my lighting, and not just having an HDR. That's typically not enough for me when I'm trying to go for a nice visual. So I'm going to do maybe 2 or 3 additional lights to the scene, and we're going to see how that looks like. So the first thing I'm going to do is now that I have this in here, just for the moment, I'm going to turn it off just so I can concentrate on these supplemental lights, and you'll see the difference between that. And we're going to actually delete this environment material light so that we're back to square 0. And we're going to add a light that's going to bounce off on the right-hand side. So what we're going to do is, I've got this little statue. I'm going to add basically, I want a light to hit approximately this area. So I'm going to hover my mouse cursor right above where I want the light hit to be. And then since you're using SLIK, you can just press Shift 9. And what that does is it looks at where your mouse is hovering over, the actual surface, hits the locator for the rig there, and then the light basically bounces off using the equations of physics and formulas. Basically, the angle of incidence is the angle of reflection in this case. And what it does is it adds it, and I'm going to zoom out once it adds it in here. There we go. And you'll see right there, that's my light that I'm adding. And I'm simulating almost having a window light in this case. Now obviously if I'm not happy with the position of the light itself, even though I kind of am, because I do like this highlight that's happening here, you can just press 9 to go anywhere else that you want. So for example, I can click here. Now this light, I'm going to kind of zoom out a bit more. You can see how it relative to the camera, that light gets added again. Kind of, if you look at it as there's a light line between the camera, which is around here, surface right here, and the light right here. That distance and that angle, they're equal to each other, and that'll give me the effect that I'm looking for. In this case, like I said, I can move it around, see what part I like about the actual lighting. I kind of like that. I might want it to be a bit more directive on the right hand side as opposed to a top view, so let's try that. And bear with me as this is a little bit slower because I'm running the screen capture software as well as the full advanced viewport. I'm trying to get used to this advanced viewport. I truly hated the old way, but sometimes it's not everything is working 100%. Hopefully it'll get resolved as time goes by. So now that I have the first light, I'm going to consider this kind of my rim light on the right. I'm going to concentrate on getting something coming in from the back side over here. And one of the first things I do to lights after adding them here, for example, is I'm going to change the color. Light is never 100% white. It's either a shade of some orange or blue if it's a natural lighting scheme, so either coming in from the sky or coming in from an actual light source. So I will kind of dial this a little bit more yellow. It doesn't have to be a lot. It just needs to be a tad off the white. And just adding some of that color in your scene adds a lot of character to lighting as opposed to having everything blown out by white as if you're doing an iPhone commercial. Don't do that. Just add a little bit more color, add some life into the lights that you're adding. It really brings everything to a much richer state when you're doing this. All right. Heck, even the iPad is going to probably have some natural light. What is it called? Time shift or something. Anyway, enough blabbering. Let's add another light here. So I'm going to add a light that's going to hit the table. What basically I want to do is almost have a window that's coming in from the side here. So these might be my studio light setup that I'm adding in addition to the scene, but I might want to have also a light coming in from a window of some sort. So I'm going to go back to my camera view. So this is my camera view. I want a light to be hitting right about here. Let's close this off for a second. I'll move this over here. So about, let's just say here. So Shift 9 one more time. This adds a secondary light. You'll see it gets added here. You could also rename these lights if you don't like, we'll actually go through it and do it here. Let's just wait for it to finish up adding the entire light information. And press Shift. So it allows you to rename the light. So the second light, we'll call it window light. And then Shift again on the first one. And we'll call this right rim light. Awesome. So now that we have that light, that looks great to some degree. It does look kind of just a flat white. I don't typically like to leave it as is, so I'm going to add a little bit of character to it. What we're going to do is click on the Advanced tool here. You'll see this little square pop up at the top, and it's plain white right now because it represents a texture that's on the actual light. What I'm going to do is actually click on that, and you'll get a bunch of textures that ship with SLIK2. So a lot of lights and gobos and things like that. But what I'm interested in is these light textures with the windows, and obviously you can add your own. So if you had an EXR texture, press the plus sign, and you're able to add your own texture if you have a window texture that's already available. So I'm going to grab this one for now and just kind of see what that looks like. You'll see this changed texture. You'll see it over here. Also see the orientation of it. And we can actually, yet again, zoom out a little bit. That looks pretty good. You'll notice here I'm going to see a few things here. So obviously, because we're using the incident angle item, it's a little bit tilted, and you can see that over here. You might not notice it in the reflections, but you can see the actual texture is what I'm saying. But if I wanted to kind of straighten this up, click on there's a little locator right in the middle of your scene. This locator allows you to overwrite translation properties. So you can do rotation or translation of the light on top of the incident angle. So whatever the incident angle is, you can go back and change that as needed without having to reset your incident angle position. Let's straighten it up. There we go. And if that looked good to you, then it looks good to me. So approximately as if the window is right above the desk over there. I actually do not want this to autosave, but it doesn't really care. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Again, it's just a matter of giving texture to the scene. Maybe this is the position might not be 100% for me, so I'll move it around a tiny bit. And again, because I have that specific window light selected, that's the one that's going to move. If I select the rim light, it'll move the rim light when I press 9. So pressing 9 just kind of changes where the hit is. And what I'm trying to do is just kind of move that light a tad, and maybe a bit closer too. So that way I'm able to see the reflections directly. There we go. You can see there's the home button. That looks pretty good. I like the texture feel of this shot. I'm still missing another light coming in from the left side, just kind of spruce some stuff up. And we'll play with the values and the colors of these once I add kind of the preliminary lighting. So I'm going to add one more light kind of hitting this. I'd just like to get some sort of fall off around here that's a bit more studio-like. So I'm going to do is Shift 9 again. This adds the third light to my scene. You can see it kind of getting added. Now, obviously, at this point in time, it looks like it's overtaking my, it's overtaking a lot of my scene lighting coming in from the window. That's not what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for something a little bit more subtle. So we might want to move it a little bit. So let's move it over here, press F9, or press 9 again. It'll move it towards the edge. And again, you have to remember it's coming in from the camera to the surface to the light, and right now what's happening is that it's super close to the surface, so you can see it here, and I don't want that specifically. Now from the camera viewport, it's easy. I can just click on the distance here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like when I'm, a lot of times I don't do this when I'm flipping around. I'm just trying to show you guys what this looks like, but I can increase the distance of my light directly, and that's through the channel hall. You just click on it and you can start seeing now. It's kind of hitting it. I still think that it's too big, likely. So what we're going to do is there's a little outline on top of any of the lights, and you can click on that and it scales. You're able to scale the light directly. So I'm able to scale that light because I don't want a huge amount. I just want there we go, tiny slither of light happening here. And you can see, because I have depth of field in the scene, it's actually softening up the edges. I'd like to soften up the edges a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Advanced, and there's an option here to, there's a couple of things actually. We can do the edge, so I can click on Edge here. What that does is it turns on the fall off of the edge around the light. So you'll see this kind of switch over to a softer edge. Oops. There we go. You can see it right there. It's kind of just softening it up. The other option is I can also do what we have is linear gradients. So I can click on this and you'll see some linear gradients here. I believe if I go to this one, you'll start seeing it kind of fall off from dark to some sort of light, and that looks a bit more soft to me. I might not want to do that here. I think the edge one works well, so I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to turn on the edge. That's good enough for me. All right, so we have the preliminary lighting happening here. And again, this is where a lot of these help out. I'm going to concentrate, and let's rename this. So shift, we'll call this left reflector. Press OK. What we're going to do is concentrate on the window light just for a second. So you notice these two little icons here. If you hover and just hold, it tells you what they are. So solo on the right and mute on the left. So I'm going to solo this light, automatically mutes the other lights. And that'll give me the ability to see what this looks like on its own. And this looks great. I feel maybe if this was a bright window, it should probably be brighter than everybody else. So I'm going to take that up to about 10. So that increases the amount of light that's coming through. Maybe that's enough, maybe not. Let's switch that over to maybe 12. Actually, let's put it to 15. That looks good, much better. Let's bring in the light from the right in. Here's my rim light over here. So this one I feel, okay, if I had a window on the right, this is maybe more art directed to the left. Let's turn off all the solos so we can see all the lights together. And remember, we still have the environment light right here. So we're going to bring that back on as well. And that's going to bring a little bit of color pop to my scene. And that already looks really, really good to me. I'm starting to see some really interesting details there. Some texture from the textures of the light over here. Some additional lighting here. I can also pump up the entire scene light. So if I press 2, all lights get multiplied by 2 times. In this case, I'm just showing you as an example, but I don't really need it here. I do feel maybe my window light still needs to be a little bit more. I'm just looking for additional highlights on the cup, on the pencil. Go to the window. I feel like also maybe I want the distance to be a tiny bit larger here. I mean, maybe less actually. Let's see. Try to think of it in my head. Let's try 0.5. Just gonna get it extreme a bit. That might be a little bit much. Let's do it at 0.8 and call it that. Final. I think that looks pretty good. And that's about what I wanted to achieve from this shot. It allowed me to grab the lighting that I had before. So I've got the interior light coming in, as well as kind of highlights coming in from the right side, from the window, from the left. So maybe the window light needs to be colored a little bit more blue in tone, because the skylight might, the sky might actually be showing through, and I wanted to show it a little bit more blue tone in here. And finally, the reflector here just needs a tiny bit of color as well. Like I said, mostly I don't leave lights in a white tone color. It's just not that interesting. Also, I think I'm feeling like this light is just too flat. All this texture here, this doesn't balance out very well. So I'm going to add a texture for this light as well. Doesn't have to be a lot. It can be very subtle. Let's try that one for now. And we're going to increase that to about 8. I'm not digging it. Looked better before. Let's try. So that one we didn't like. Just trying to see which ones make sense to me. Let's go for that one. too much texture. A lot of it's just visual. You're just trying to see what is the best thing that you can get out of these setups. That looks okay. It's got some gradient in there, but I can still see a clear line right there. That looks great. Once I have everything, just set this to full resolution, and just finish off at whatever value you want. To show you kind of some of the additional things that you do find in SLIK that I find useful when you're dealing with lighting. There's this option here to override materials and colors. And what I like about this is that I'm able to quickly grab anything I want. So for example, I want to see what the lighting looks like without any textures or materials, and just kind of focus on that. I'm going to click on glossy black. What this will do is add here's a complete black glossy. And you can see here, I can tell exactly what the lighting is doing. And that's really helpful sometimes when you just want to concentrate on the lighting and not necessarily the textures themselves. I can see here, okay, this looks like a window. Here's the lighting on the left. Here's some highlights coming in from the right. Obviously, there's the room colors are also factoring in. Sometimes you want to see that on a matte surface instead of a black gloss. And that gives you, like, depends on what kind of materials you're using. But if I'm working with a lot of matte materials, this is a great way to kind of see it without having to fiddle around with your materials, and you just kind of concentrate on just the lighting. And obviously, lighting black materials or dark materials is very different than white materials, because you might be overblowing. So, for example, this kind of lighting might overblow my white, and I'd have to play around with either my exposure or with my lighting values directly to get something that's a bit better looking and not kind of killing my my white surfaces. It's very hard to kind of get white surfaces and lighting done at the same time. So this helps you kind of in that space. And if you have neutrals and you know that's going to be what you're going to be using, you just set it to gray, and that looks okay. That looks decent. And I'm okay with kind of neutral colors, which is approximately what we have. We don't have too many dark colors and too white colors. We just kind of live in the neutral zone. You can also select any color you want. So if I want it specifically, if I'm dealing with some sort of red product or green product, it does help to kind of go to that hue and that value to see how your lighting is going to affect that if you knew exactly what the colors are going to be like, but you just don't have a final on it. You can also save that as a preset if you want to. That's about it. I can also swap it over to glossy, obviously. Click the X to remove it, and that gets you back to all the wonderful materials that you had spent some time configuring. And that's it for me. I'm going to let this cook and show you the final result. Make sure to add things like depth of field to your shots just to give them a sense of depth, I guess, and richness in addition to the HDR. That really is the differentiator factor. So if you're using other render engines, a lot of times you're forced to use depth of field because that's the default. In Modo, by default, you don't have that on, but I do encourage you to start using that. As our computers get more powerful and the software gets faster, you're not getting a hit as bad as usual. So those do make your shots come to life when there's more depth and kind of your eyes used to seeing that kind of effect in the real world, as well as the natural photography as well. And that's it for me. I hope this was useful for you. Like I said, I'll put all the links for all the assets that I have here, as well as the SLIK2 in the links below. RAW should be coming up within a couple of weeks. This allows you to speed up your render settings in a very easy manner, not having to fiddle around with everything. There's some additional tools in here as well, but that'll be a separate video down the line. All right, have a good one. I'm going to set this to kind of go. Now that the render is done, we're going to take it to After Effects, just kind of slightly tune some of these colors and values and just get the final out of it. But like I said before, when we're talking about the lighting, so when you're doing things like fabrics, typically having side lighting or directional lighting coming from the sides will really accentuate the textures that are on the surface. If this was lit from the top, perpendicular to the surface itself, this wouldn't be as interesting. But having the lights coming from the right, from the back, and from the left really make the textures pop. So a lot of times that's what you're looking for within the fabrics. And obviously they also accentuate things that have just bump maps in general. The 3 renders I used were just typical, the final color, a depth pass, and an AO pass. I typically like the depth pass because I just add a bit of depth of field sometimes, not all the time, in After Effects. And then AO pass, I'll just kind of use that to burn in some of the values. And again, it just depends on the use itself. So we're going to grab these, stick them inside of After Effects. We'll do a new composition. These are all rendered at 1920, 1080. We just need 1 frame. I'm going to do 0, 0, 1. There we go. And we're just going to bring them all in. Great. Let's drop the depth of field all the way at the bottom. That's not going to be visible. AO pass. Typically, I like to do either a classic color dodge or a classic color burn. And this one, we don't need it to be that high, so I'll take that to something like 10. It's really subtle. You want to go for an effect that is almost not noticeable, for me at least. The image for the lighting, so we can either do the effects on the image itself. I typically like to do it as an adjustment layer, so we'll get to layer, new, adjustment. We'll put that on top. And we're going to add so I like to use Frischluft, I don't know how you would say this name, but depth of field plugin. It allows much better, in my opinion, values for the depth of field. It doesn't have as many artifacts with edges as the normal depth of fields that I've seen, either natively, even inside of Photoshop. So I tend to use that. You want to select the depth that's correct. So my depth that was correct is about there. And you'll see if I add more depth in here, it'll toggle that on and off. So you can see right there, I've added a bit more of this depth of field right there. I can toggle that on and off, and you'll notice that it's nice and smooth and works like magic. That looks pretty good. Another thing I like to do is, I don't know if you guys use any kind of like this is totally doable with an Instagram filter, but I have Magic Bullet Looks. I find this to be a great tool to use, and it's pretty damn easy. You use it, it's literally like Instagram filters. You go through these filters and you look for a look that you like. I'm just hovering over what I feel looks nice. And obviously there's a bunch of them. I like this, so I'm going to use that. Press OK. And typically I don't use ones that distort the image. I don't believe this one distorts it. It just does values in there. And you can still do other things to it. Something like soft light, and then play it around with transparency, and it just really just get to a color or a value that you like. That looks great to me. I'm going to add one more adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a color correction node, and I'm just going to play a little bit with the curves, just to have it punch up just a little bit more. That looks pretty good to me. We'll call this done, and that is it. I'm out. Hopefully that was a good set of kind of walking through how to light things that have fabric in them and textures, and using SLIK as well as other tools that we've gone through. The reason I do it in After Effects is because this is flexible to me. Photoshop is, you got to go convert to smart objects and things like that, but also I do a lot of times where I render multiple shots and I just have them in sequence, and I can just run After Effects to have them all done at the same time live. But if you've enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe to Pixel Fondue. Hopefully we'll have more of these tutorials and freebies kind of for you guys to check out. And that's it. Have a good one. Bye.
Yum, yum!